Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture. You found us at WallBuilders Live. You can check out our website at wallbuilderslive.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton and Tim Barton. And, man, the election news just keeps pouring in, still undecided, and will be for probably quite some time. David, Tim, let's just jump in. Catch us up. What happened yesterday, and where are we as of Tuesday?
Well, there was a lot that happened yesterday. Late in the afternoon, President Trump issued a call for prayer. He asked the people pray because they were going to the Supreme Court at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And so at that point, they filed an amicus with the U.S. Supreme Court asking the Supreme Court to take up the issue in Pennsylvania, where that the state Supreme Court issued a ruling that you can receive votes for several days after the election's over. Instead of the election being done on election day, they actually extended votes coming in late. So that went to the Supreme Court. There's other stuff going on in Pennsylvania as well, different kinds of lawsuits that are going there. You actually had Missouri and Kentucky attorneys generals joining the lawsuit that's going in Pennsylvania over mail-in ballots and that deadline extension. So you now have things going in the U.S. Supreme Court.
So attorneys generals from other states actually joining in that and saying how bad Pennsylvania got this.
Yes, because if that's a precedent that's allowed to stand, it affects every state.
Yeah.
If that kind of precedent that we can change the election at the last hour, at the 11th hour, we can add more days or do whatever. If a law does not mean what law means, then it's bad for the other states. So you now have several other states that have jumped in as well, in Nevada. And by the way, President Trump was issuing tweets today on what's happening in various states. He was talking about Nevada and Michigan and other states, and Twitter shut him down and said, well, that's not true information. Well, I would think he knows what his lawsuits are about, but nonetheless, Twitter shut him down, which now makes 111 times that Twitter has shut down President Trump, and they've shut down Joe Biden 0. So Trump got pulled down for giving updates on this. But in Nevada, they have now found a number of dead people voting, and they have recorded a Biden-Harris van that came in from out of state with bags of mail-in ballots in it. So they have that being delivered in Nevada, and that's an issue that's going on there that came up today. There's 3 stories out of Michigan that tens of thousands of unsealed ballots came to Michigan County, and all were for Democrats. So there's now a lawsuit pending on that. Because when ballots come in, they don't all go for one candidate, especially when they come in big bags like that. There's now one, Pat Colbeck, whom we had on several times. He has documented and given sworn affidavits. He'll be part of the lawsuit saying that he watched online as the computer counts, not only were they counting, but they were attached to outside online sources at the time. And that's illegal because that means somebody from the outside can be dumping votes in while you're counting. And so he has all the stuff on the affidavits of that, how that he saw them and pointed out to them and recorded that they were connected to outside sources online as they were counting ballots on the electronic counting. So they can't do that. That's another part of the lawsuit. And now, with all this going on, the Michigan legislature on Saturday, so this weekend, they called themselves into a special session to start holding an investigation into all the irregularities that are going on in Michigan. So now the House and Senate have gotten into the fray there because they've had so many calls and so much evidence given by their own constituents that now the legislature is looking into it. So Michigan is still really kind of blowing up. It's still really early to say anything, but lots of legal stuff going there. The Trump lawsuit in Arizona is still going, and the Trump campaign files another lawsuit over the rejected votes. So Maricopa County, which is a Democrat area, they were accepting Democrat votes that had the same kind of irregularities and throwing out the Republican votes that did not. So the selective picking and choosing of which votes they count and which they don't, and what's being rejected. So they have a lawsuit now going on that in Arizona as well. So that's what's going on in Arizona. Jumping into other election news, I got an update from California last night that in Orange County, which has been blue for several elections, that every one of the Democrats had won until they finished counting the ballots, and now all the Republicans have won. All of them switched. And so it switched from Democrat to Republican because they counted the military ballots and they counted the mail-in ballots they had not counted yet when they announced all the Democrat wins. So you now have 2 congressional seats held by Republican women that were previously held by Democrats in Orange County. So that's a real shift. The congressional balance of power as of last night set at 215 Democrats that have been confirmed elected, and they need 218 to have a majority, and 200 Republicans. So Republicans have thus far had a +7 gain in the House, so there's 20 seats still out. And right now, Republicans lead in 16 of those 20 seats. So if there's no surprises, it could end up being 219 to 216. But if one or two of those Democrats that are expected to win end up not winning, it could be that Republicans actually take the House. But at this point, they're going to be very close, just side by side with the Democrats, almost even parity if they don't take the House, which is the way things look right now.
Man, it sounds like we're still winning in a lot of ways. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me anyway. Quick break. We're going to talk to one of those congressmen, Barry Loudermilk from Georgia, get an update on the congressional races and on what's going on in Georgia as well. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
This is Tim Barton from WallBuilders with another moment from American history. In 1963, the United States Supreme Court decided that voluntary Bible reading could no longer be part of the school day. Founding Father Benjamin Rush, known as the father of public schools under the Constitution, pointedly warned that the Bible should be read in schools in preference to all other books. He specifically warned that if America ever ceased promoting biblical principles in schools, then we would waste so much time and money in punishing crimes and take so little pains to prevent them. He was right. We now have 7 million Americans in prison, on probation, or on parole, and the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Sadly, this was unnecessary, but is the result of no longer teaching the morals of the Bible in schools. For more information about the Founding Fathers' views on the positive impact of the Bible in schools, go to WallBuilders.com.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Our good friend Congressman Barry Loudermilk of Georgia is back with us. Congressman, always good to have you, man.
Oh, it's always good to be with you, Rick.
And why is it we seem to get you when times are crazy? What's up with that?
Well, it's 2020. I mean, anytime. This year has been
That's true.
Just like that, you know?
That's true, no doubt. Well, first of all, I'm assuming your election went really well.
It did. It was, big turnout for Republicans across Georgia. And I had probably the most formidable opponent I've ever had. She raised more money than any other opponent I've had on the Democrat side, but yet we won with a larger margin than we ever have in a general election. So it's crazy.
Excellent.
It's really crazy.
Well, congratulations on that for sure. And I'm sure being a Georgia congressman, you're watching the Georgia recount and election chaos that's happening across the country. 7 states still really, frankly, some sort of limitation on being able to say that they're done when there's a court case or a recount, or they're not even done counting. So anyway, there's chaos all over. So we want to talk to you a little bit about the chaos and what you make of the Georgia situation, but also, man, I mean, Republicans cleaned house on the state legislative races and the congressional races. You guys in Congress, in the Republican caucus, must be high-fiving right now.
Well, we are, and we're still, it looks like we're going to be gaining some more seats. And it was amazing to me that by an hour after the polls closed in Georgia, I'm watching the television, and one of the news channels predicts that the Democrats are going to gain 15 seats. And I'm scratching my head. What? How in the world are they claiming this when the results aren't even coming in yet? It's almost like they were reading a script.
Yeah.
But yet, not only did Nancy Pelosi not gain seats, she's losing seats. We have already picked up a net gain of 7. There's 2 more seats in New York that we are 99% sure we're going to pick those up. There's 3 in California that we're highly positive we're going to get. But all in all, we won't have quite enough to get the majority, it looks like, but it's going to be just a within 2 or 3 seat majority for Nancy Pelosi, which is really a huge gain for us.
And completely the opposite, right, of what the polling the media, they've been trying to feed us that all year long. Y'all proved them wrong for sure. And we really, across the board, the Senate races, the presidential race, it was all way off from what the media said was going to happen, which lends, somewhat to this question of, is the presidential race accurate from what people are saying? How could you guys have gained seats in the House, We held all those Senate seats. I mean, the legislative races across the country were, heavily went the Republicans' way. They didn't get any of the state chambers that they thought they were going to get. We got 3 of theirs. I mean, on every other side of the ledger, Republicans did incredibly well, and yet here we are on this presidential race with all these questionable ballots and questionable things happening.
And questionable is the word. And I look at it at if they're questionable, then we need to resolve it. But we have so many forces that are trying to stop us from even determining, is a ballot legal or is it not? The irony is the morning after the election, I checked on the Georgia Secretary of State's website to look at the map of the counties in Georgia and see which counties still had not reported their vote tallies. And there was a little dozen or so, and that looked very familiar to me, so I went and pulled up the map from the 2016 election. And would you believe the counties that were still counting ballots are the exact counties to the number that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016? Now, how is it that the Republican voting counties were able to get their vote tallies done, but yet the Democrats weren't? And then days later, they keep finding more and more and more ballots.
Yeah.
So these are, highly questionable circumstances that we need to get to the bottom of. And we jumped in with the Trump team, and we're helping them. In Georgia, if you send in an absentee ballot and it is rejected, you have them until 3 days after the election to go to the elections office and do what they call cure the ballot, which is resolve the issue if it's a signature mismatch, or let's say your ballot was damaged in the mail and couldn't be read. You can come in and fill out a new replacement ballot. There were 8,000 Republicans in Georgia that their ballots were rejected for some reason or another. So we put together our campaign team and several others, and we called all 8,000 Republicans in 2 days to get them to go fix their ballots. During that process, though, we found a mother of a soldier who was killed in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. She found out his ballot was received at one of the elections offices.
Oh, wow.
Someone had hijacked his ballot. We're getting reports of people who went to go vote in person, and they were being told, no, you cannot vote because we already received your absentee ballot, when they did not send in an absentee ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So we have several cases, individual cases of people who are willing to sign affidavits that they were victims of voter fraud. So we know it's out there to the extent it's what we need to determine during the recount, and there needs to be a full audit.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anybody say, unequivocally, absolutely, there was enough fraud here to steal the election. What we're all saying is, we just want to know for sure. We just want transparency. We just want, really, for the peace of the country, right? I mean, I had a recount years ago, and after my recount, I had lost on election night, 20-vote difference. We had a recount. My opponent and I both, we watched every ballot, all 30,000 ballots. One of our team members was looking at every ballot. When it was all said and done, I won. And he didn't demand another recount like he could have under the law. He said, hey, man, we looked at every ballot. You won. It's obvious. I mean, that's what you want at the end of the day, is for both sides to be able to say, okay, you may have won, you may have lost, but you can have some confidence that at least it was accurate.
Exactly. And the question I have is, if you're not doing anything wrong in counting the ballots initially, why would you not allow somebody to watch what you're doing? And we're seeing that play out in Pennsylvania. I don't see how the Supreme Court cannot overturn Pennsylvania's elections, because they have violated even the opinion of the Supreme Court in Bush v. Gore, to where each county was treating voters differently. And that was one of the key decisions that gave Bush the presidency back during that in early 2000s. And so Pennsylvania is clearly violating that. And so we may be looking at a situation. I just heard that Real Clear Politics has just withdrawn their projection of Biden winning Pennsylvania and have taken back those electorates. And so
that's huge.
Put Biden back below the 270 mark. So we could end up with the House of Representatives making this decision on the House floor.
Yeah.
Of who's going to be the president.
And from what I understand, Barry, and I know you guys are already looking at this, that is done by state, and we have at least 26 delegations and could end up with 28 or 29 after all the recounting, but we have at least 26. Is that right?
That's right. And, as more of these races start coming in, we'll get a better picture of it. But, yes, Republicans hold the majority of state delegations. And so this is, even though Democrats have a majority of the members of Congress, that's because of New York and California and Illinois. They're, high population centers, and they just have a whole lot of Democrats, but very few Republicans. But Republicans are scattered across the various states, and we do hold a majority, or it's believed we will hold a majority of those states, and it is one vote per state. So, this is 26 votes.
Yeah.
And we've selected a president.
That's right, and that's not the first time it's happened. So for all those people that would think, oh, you're doing something that's never been done, not at all. It's been done multiple times, actually. It's kind of the Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams battle of 1824 and other examples as well. But, I don't know. Most people don't know, and I'm sure you remember, Mark Harris's redo of an election whenever they couldn't verify that those mail-in ballots and all that were accurate. They literally redid the election. Is that too much to ask of a state to do that? And is anybody in Congress talking about that?
Well, there is some discussion on it, but when you look at Georgia, okay, and it's really, you've got two races that are in question, or possibly three. You've got the presidential race, and then we're in a unique situation where we actually have two Senate races going on at the same time because of Senator Johnny Isakson resigning for health reasons before his term was up. So those are the only races that really may have been impacted by this, possibly one congressional seat up in the northeastern portion of the state. So it's kind of a balancing act. Do you redo the entire election, which we were able to hold the state house and the state senate? Were those elections, subjected to the fraud, or was it just the presidential? Because obviously when you look at it, there had to be a large number of ballots that came in just voting for the president and possibly the Senate candidates and didn't go down ballot. So that's, I think they're trying to avoid doing re-elections, but you could see that happen. But if that does happen, then that's going to be a huge undertaking, especially to get an election done before Inauguration Day.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
What do you do with House candidates?
Yeah. Especially if it's going to impact the House candidates, no doubt about it. And just to be clear for our listeners on the dates of all this stuff, you guys are sworn in on the 3rd, January 3rd. The counting of the electoral ballots by law is January 6th. That's not a constitutional provision, but that's a federal law that's done on January 6th, and the Constitution gives Congress the power to do that. So it would be the new Congress that would make these big decisions, right?
Right. It would be. And so that also is helpful to our side because we will have a larger number of Republican members in the House of Representatives. And keep in mind with Pennsylvania, if the Supreme Court throws out a certain number of ballots, because one thing that my understanding is they did in Pennsylvania is when the question was brought up on certain ballots, those ballots were set aside. They weren't intermingled. So if those ballots are thrown out by the Supreme Court, we could be looking at actually winning 3 more House seats in Pennsylvania. So,
wow,
it's 2020 all over. I mean, it's just
oh my goodness, Barry. So you're saying wait a minute, I didn't know about this. So you're saying that, and especially if all these other races that are still haven't even been called, you guys could get to like 214 maybe. I mean, and then if those 3 came in, we're looking at 218, 217. You're giving me nightmares here, man.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, we're looking at, in reality, somewhere between 210 and 212.
Yeah.
And, it's 218 to have the majority. And people rotate out of Congress all the time. Look, there's a lot of our members that are elderly, and you have some that die in office. You have some that resign, some that get caught doing bad things,
right?
And they're pushed out of office. When you're looking at, if we're sitting at 212 to 215, the majority could flip in the middle of Congress at some point.
Yeah. Wow. Man, that's just what you're really telling me is 2020 is never going to end. Is that what you're saying, Barry? No,
that's right. It's going to be a whole different ball game in Washington D.C. This coming year, because one thing you also have to reflect upon is the power of your majority also determines the makeup of different committees. So the committees are ratioed by the number of seats each party has. So we're going to see a much closer ratio between Republicans and Democrats in some of these committees. And for the moderate Democrats that are still left that have been upset about the socialist move that has taken over the Democratic Party, you may see a little more cooperation with Republicans from that side, and may even be able to see some legislation move through committee that we've been shut down with in the past.
Very interesting. All right, brother, I kept you longer than I said I would. Before we go, how important is it for people to help in Georgia over the next 60 days if you end up with those two runoffs?
Extremely important. There is so much. There is even talk right now of some of the Silicon Valley billionaires and Wall Street billionaires paying people to move into Georgia and vote. There is a little loophole in the law that if the only way you can vote in a special election, a runoff election, is if you had already registered to vote for the November election. So you can't come and just register and vote just to be able to vote in that runoff election unless you're 17 years old and you turn 18 before that election. And so there's already efforts out there by some of these billionaires to pay young people to actually move into Georgia. They'll pay for their apartment just so they can register and vote. I mean, this is how desperate these folks have come to take over power. So we need people working. We need people helping. Our candidates are going to have to raise all this money again. And I can tell you millions and millions of dollars from Democrats are going to flow into Georgia. And I'm not just talking about run-of-the-mill Democrats. I'm talking about far-left socialists are going to be trying to take these two Senate seats. And that could tip the balance of power in the Senate.
Yeah. No, it could be the whole ball game, especially if Biden is actually president. That means Kamala Harris is the Senate president and breaks that 50-50 tie if we were to lose both of those seats in Georgia, which, right. I literally could see $1 billion being spent in 60 days. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility, especially if you're talking about moving people in like that. Right. So, man, all right, brother. Well, we look forward to having you back. Excited about your reelection, really excited about the number of victories, and a lot of good people come to help you. There's a lot of Barry Loudermilk types that got elected this time, and so there's some really good conservatives coming, a lot of pro-life ladies. I mean, there's just just a lot of good stuff that happened. Everybody that's down out there, they need to know we got good people like you in Washington fighting for us. We appreciate you, man.
Well, thank you, Rick. We appreciate all you do to keep the people engaged and informed.
Well, stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. That was Congressman Barry Loudermilk. Be right back with David and Tim Barton.
Hi friends, this is Tim Barton of WallBuilders. This is a time when most Americans don't know much about American history or even heroes of the faith, and I know oftentimes for parents, we're trying to find good content for our kids to read. And if you remember back to the Bible, to the book of Hebrews, it has the Faith Hall of Fame where they outlined the leaders of faith that had gone before them. Well, this is something that as Americans, we really want to go back and outline some of these heroes, not just of American history, but heroes of Christianity and our faith as well. I want to let you know about some biographical sketches we have available on our website. One is called the Courageous Leaders Collection. And this collection includes people like Abigail Adams, Abraham Lincoln, Francis Scott Key, George Washington Carver, Susanna Wesley, even the Wright brothers. And there's a second collection called Heroes of History. In this collection, you'll read about people like Benjamin Franklin or Christopher Columbus, Daniel Boone, George Washington, Harriet Tubman. Friends, the list goes on and on. This is a great collection for your young person to have and read, and it's a providential view of American and Christian history. This is available at wallbuilders.com. That's www.wallbuilders.com.
We're back here at WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us, and thanks to Congressman Barry Loudermilk for joining us as well. All right, David, Tim, obviously still close. As Barry said, there's still congressional seats out that we don't know, like you were saying earlier, David. But on the congressional side, it looks great. And even on the presidential side, things are starting to move the other direction.
Well, guys, the fact that so much of the corruption is continuing to come forward and be exposed, when the argument against so much of what President Trump has been doing, saying let's investigate, let's find out these lawsuits, people have said, look, voter this voter fraud doesn't happen. There's not widespread voter fraud, and yet you're finding these battleground states continued cases coming forward. And so certainly even what we're hearing with some of what's happening in Georgia, these other places, that even as you mentioned before, Barry was on in this interview with what's being found, it's very telling. But I was so encouraged when Congressman Loudermilk talked about the fact that, and this was something I'd not really thought about till he brought it up. And Dad, I mean, certainly you pointed this out too. But the reality that if we're looking right now where the election is, and certainly looking at Trump and going, man, it's so sad that things haven't turned out better yet. We still think a lot of that might change in court. We're still very prayerfully optimistic. But looking at the House and looking at the fact that Nancy Pelosi possibly could start as the Speaker of the House because she's a leader from the majority, and somewhere in the middle of this term of Congress, she might lose that position because if 3 or 4 seats change, then all of a sudden Republicans, and what Barry pointed out, right? I mean, sometimes people, they retire, they step down, they're forced down, they die. Guys, this is a crazy thought, right, which gives me so much encouragement with what's going forward with the lawsuits, with the Senate, and even the House. Going back just a couple days ago, never thought we could possibly be where we are right now. This is good news for potentially where we can go forward.
Folks, you got to tune in to WallBuilders Live for an update on this. Tomorrow we're going to take a break from the election because it's Veterans Day, and so we're going to honor a veteran. Got a special guest tomorrow on the program, but then Thursday we'll be talking about Foundations of Freedom with regard to what the Constitution says about all of this. Good News Friday, we're going to highlight some more of these victories across the country, so don't miss it. Check it out at wallbuilderslive.com or listen to a station near you. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided, forever